Ingo. All right. Chapter 16, lights out. Last one tonight. So if somebody's out there hanging, it's like whatever night it is, I don't know. Anyway, Wednesday. Yeah. Once the twins had been put to bed, the adults and teenagers talked about what they wanted to do the next day. Mark was going to take Jerry to get his Jeep, and Sam and David both wanted to go with him. Lisa wanted to go check on her parents. Mark thought he should try to get to Waco to check on his family too. Jess said she needed to review their master list and see if Kroger had received the shipment they were expecting. Does this mean we're going to stay here? We never have made a definite decision, Mark said. What does everyone think? Jess asked. I vote for here, Lisa stated. I don't like the politics at the ranch. If we could get this place secured like Gunny suggested, I think we stand a better chance here. The ranch location is better than here, but they have too few people to really secure it. I think the larger group here gives us the best chance, Jim gave his opinion. I liked the ranch, but I'd rather stay here at our house, David said, which surprised Mark a little. I want to stay here too, Jess implored. I think everybody knows my reasons. I may have different reasons than everybody else, but I want to stay too, Sam added. Well, I guess I'll make it unanimous, Mark said. I'm still very concerned about some things, though. What's your biggest concern, Jess asked. Water. We have water. Only as long as we have fuel for the generator. Once that runs out, and I don't know when that'll be, we can't run the pump, Mark explained. There's tons of gas in the cars that don't run, Lisa said. Yeah, but gas doesn't last forever, Jim said. It can go bad in as little as 3 months. What about a hand pump like they used in the old days, David asked. I don't think those pumps will pull water up from very far. Our well is about 200 feet deep. What would do it? Jim asked. A solar jack pump like they have at the ranch would do it, or a windmill. We'll have to figure out how much water the neighborhood would need per day, then see how many gallons per hour a windmill can pump. Dad, remember at the ranch they said they took out an old windmill to put in the solar pump? Maybe we could get that windmill, David suggested. That's good thinking, Dave, Mark said, as David beamed. Maybe we could work out a trade with them, Jim added. Hunting, fishing, shooting, and karate lessons for the windmill and some other stuff we might need. I guess we need to go talk to them before Saturday, Mark said. Man, we have so much to do in so little time. We have plenty of time, don't we? Jess asked. Not really. According to the news, the riots are getting worse in the big cities. It's only a matter of time before they start here. And when they do, I don't know how much we're going to be able to go into town, or go anywhere for that matter. He's right, Jim said. Todd and Mr. Davis figured about 2 weeks before riots started here. I think we may have a little longer, but they studied it at least some. To be on the safe side, we should try to get the most important stuff done by Sunday. Why don't we make a list of everything we need to do and get and prioritize it? Everyone agreed that Jim's idea was a good one. They worked on the list for more than an hour. They couldn't agree on some of the priorities, but they were able to put to bed what everyone needed to do the next day. Mark and Lisa would take the Jeep and drive the Watsons to their ranch. Then they'd come home through Uvalde and check on Lisa's parents. Jim and Jess would take the trucks to town and buy some more groceries if Kroger would let them. Then they'd try to buy some jerry cans and get as much gas as they could from cars in the neighborhood. Mark said they could no longer afford the gas to keep the deep freeze going, so Sam would start cutting the deer meat in the freezer into strips for jerky while she watched the twins. David was given the job he least wanted. Someone needed to poll all of the neighbors and find out how many people each house contained, what skills everyone possessed, and how they were fixed for food, if they had any medical needs, and what supplies and equipment they might have that the whole neighborhood could use. Mark explained to David to ask specifically about gardening equipment. He suggested that Jess ask Mrs. Peterson if she'd go with David. He assured David that he trusted him to do the job and told him that some adults might be more comfortable answering questions if an adult was accompanying them. With the assignments for the next day done, everyone headed for bed except for Mark and Sam. They first went to the freezer and took the meat to the kitchen to thaw out. Dad, do you think the lights will ever come back on? Sam asked. Of course they will, sweetheart. When? That's the big question, isn't it? Mark answered. It could be 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years. I just don't know. But I think we're doing the smart thing. We're preparing like it's going to be 2 years. Can we make it for 2 years without power? I think we can, but I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be tough. There's a lot of work to do and a lot of stuff we need. The work we can do, but I don't know where we're going to get some of the stuff. But we'll find a way to get by. I know we will, Dad. Just promise me one thing. What's that? I love the twins, but promise me I'm not going to be the one to watch them all the time. Sweetheart, I can promise you that, but you probably will have to watch them more than you're going to want. We aren't going to have the luxury of making sure all of the work is evenly divided. Everyone's going to have to pitch in where they can. Everyone's going to have to pitch in where they can do the most good and where they're needed the most. It's not a punishment, it's just part of being a responsible adult. I know, Dad, I just want to do some of the exciting stuff too. Be careful what you ask for, sweetie. You may find that the exciting stuff isn't as exciting as you think. Mark kissed his daughter on the head. Now get your butt to bed. You've got a lot of meat to cut tomorrow. All right, Dad. I love you too. I love you too. Sam headed out the door for the camper. Mark looked around. He thought that if it would just cool off a little more, they could sleep in the house. He wondered if there was anything they could do to get more circulation in the bedrooms. He'd have to give that some thought. After he locked the doors, he headed to the camper and climbed into bed. He knew he had a big day tomorrow and needed to get some sleep, but his mind was racing. The last time he remembered looking at his watch, it said 2:30. When the alarm went off, Mark wished he'd slept more. He got up, showered, dressed, and headed outside. It was almost chilly. He checked the thermometer on the side of the camper. It said 64 degrees. Not exactly blue northern, but still pretty cool for September in Texas. He went to the shed and set 3 of the full jerry cans and 1 of the 5-gallon water jugs next to the Jeep. 2 of the jerry cans went into a carrier on the tailgate that also held the spare tire and a high-lift jack. The 3rd gas can and the water jug went behind the back seat with the toolbox and first aid kit. There was also a 12-volt air compressor, an extra quart of oil, and a tow strap back there. Mark then topped off the Jeep's gas tank with another gas can and checked the oil. About that time, Lisa and Jim came out of the camper. Need any help, Jim asked. No, I think the Jeep's ready. I was just going in the house to get a rifle. Is Lisa going to take a gun? She didn't really want to, but when I told her she had to take at least a handgun, I'm giving her my .357. She likes shooting it. She's pretty good with it. Mark, Jim, and Lisa walked into the house. Jess was in the kitchen. What are you doing in there? Mark asked. I live here, remember? She shot back with a wink. I know. I didn't see you get up. I got up when you were in the shower. I wanted to fix you and Lisa a good breakfast before you left. Thank you. You're welcome. Now sit down and eat, all of you. While they were eating, Jess was fixing sandwiches and putting them into a small cooler. They all discussed again what they had to get done that day. You guys be careful, Jess admonished as Mark and Lisa got into the Jeep. She handed the cooler to Lisa. We will, Mark promised. Tell your folks I'm sorry the girls and I couldn't come this time and that we love them, Jim told Lisa. I will, Lisa answered. We'll see you all tonight. Mark started the Jeep and headed out of the subdivision. As he turned onto the main road, the sun was just peeking over the horizon. When he and Lisa got to Jerry's house, the brothers were waiting outside. They each had a rifle case and a small duffel bag. Mark helped them load the bags behind the back seat on the top of the other stuff. They climbed into the back as they said hello to Lisa and put their rifle cases on the floor. As Mark pulled out onto the road, Jerry handed him a map with the route highlighted. We figure it might be best to stay off the interstate, Jerry explained. This is the way we go on holiday weekends to beat the traffic. It's a little longer, but we shouldn't have to dodge as many stalled cars. That sounds good, Mark replied. After we get your Jeep running, Lisa and I are going to drive up to Uvalde to check on her parents. I was wondering why she came with you, Tony smiled. I thought maybe she got elected to make sure we didn't get into any trouble today. Jess told me to watch you Watson boys real good. She said if Mark came home with another gun, all of you would be in big trouble, Lisa teased back. The men all laughed. The trip to Cotulla went quickly. The foursome chatted about the events of the last 8 days and how much longer it could go until it really got ugly in the city. Jerry had been right about there not being too many stalled cars on this route. However, any time Mark came to a hill or blind curve, he slowed way down just in case. When they got to the Watsons' ranch, Jerry unlocked the gate and they drove up to the camp house. It only took Mark about 20 minutes to get the parts replaced on the Jeep. When they tried to start it, the battery wouldn't turn the engine over fast enough to start. They hooked up the jumper cables from Mark's vehicle, and the old CJ sprang to life on the next turn of the key. As Mark was taking the cables off of the battery on the Watson's Jeep, he was distracted for a moment when Lisa said something about eating. When he glanced away, the unshrouded fan hit the outside edge of his right hand. "Shit," Mark yelled, as he realized that this was the first time he had cursed in a couple days. He dropped the cables to the ground and clutched the hand to his chest. "What happened?" Lisa asked. "The fan hit my hand," he responded as he looked at the injury. "That was a small cut that didn't seem to be bleeding, but I think it's okay." Mark had spoken too soon. The fan strike had initially mashed the capillaries closed, but when they opened back up, and the blood started to flow freely. Lisa looked at it and had Mark move his fingers. She informed him that it would be okay, but was going to throb for several days. She got the first aid kit out of the Jeep and cleaned and bandaged Mark's hand. "You know, if you really got hurt, it might be hard to find proper medical care, even if we weren't in the middle of nowhere," she warned him. "I know," he said sheepishly. "We all need to make sure we're extra careful." The men washed up with some of the water Mark had brought, and then Lisa pulled out the cooler and handed out sandwiches to everyone. After they'd eaten, Jerry and Tony went to a storage building and retrieved some gas cans and filled the Jeep's tank. They loaded the remaining 2 full cans along with their bags and rifles into their Jeep. "How long are you going to stay in Uvalde?" Jerry asked. "Probably only about an hour," Lisa answered. "I just want to check on my folks." "We were thinking about going with you, if that's okay," Tony inquired. "We'd feel better if we all stuck together, just in case one of those old rust buckets broke down or something." "We appreciate that," Mark responded. "Are we ready to go?" Everyone nodded their heads, loaded into the Jeeps, and headed out. As they approached the area where Lisa's parents lived, some of the houses were burned to the ground. A few of them were still smoldering. The closer they got to the subdivision, the worse the devastation was. When they reached the entrance, it was apparent that none of the houses had escaped destruction. Lisa was in tears. "I'm sure they got out," Mark said as he brought the Jeep to a stop. "What could have happened?" she asked. "I don't know. Let's go back to town and find out." Mark turned the Jeep around and Jerry followed him. They drove to the courthouse and parked near the entrance to the sheriff's department. Mark noticed that the vehicles parked in the spaces reserved for patrol cars didn't look quite right. Each had a light bar, antennas, and a sheriff's emblem on the door, but they were all different colors and makes. There was a maroon 1970s LTD, an old Dodge pickup that still had some blue paint on it, and a beautiful late 60s GTO in candy apple red. Tony whistled as they passed the muscle car. "Man, what I wouldn't give to have one of those," he said longingly. The other 2 men nodded in agreement, but Lisa, if she even heard them, ignored the comment and marched directly for the entrance. When they got inside the door, there was a dispatcher and 2 deputies behind the counter. One of the deputies saw them and came to the counter. "Can I help y'all?" "I'm looking for my parents," Lisa blurted. "My name is Lisa Davis. They lived in the subdivision north of town on Highway 83. The whole neighborhood is burned. What happened?" "Do you know where they are? Their names are George and Alice Garrett. I have to find them." "Ma'am, just calm down," the deputy drawled. "A small airplane crashed into the subdivision when the burst hit. It started a fire and the volunteer fire department wasn't able to stop it. Most of the residents were able to get out. Why don't y'all come back to my desk and we'll see what information we have on your folks." They followed the deputy and he motioned for Lisa to sit in the chair next to his desk. The men stood behind her. The deputy dug through a pile of papers and finally found the ones he was looking for. He ran his finger down the first page and then flipped the page. When he had looked at all 3 pages, he flipped back to the first page and went through them again. He then set the report down and looked at Lisa. "I have good news and bad news," he began. "The good news is that there are no Garretts on the list of fatalities or injuries from the fire." "Thank God," Lisa exclaimed. "What's the bad news?" "Well, all the survivors went to stay with friends or relatives or are at the shelter set up at the high school. We got all of the names we could of those who went where, but your parents aren't on any of the lists." "What does that mean?" It means one of two things. First, and most likely, the records we have of survivors are very inaccurate. They may be staying with someone and we just haven't noticed it. Don't have it recorded. Or, now this is just a possibility, we have a few bodies we haven't been able to ID. Oh my God, Lisa cried, putting her head in her hands. Mark patted her on the shoulder and the deputy took hold of her hands. Now look here, Mrs. Davis, there's no sense getting yourself all worked up until you know for sure what happened. This is what you need to do. First, go to the hospital and make sure they aren't there. Then go to the high school and see if they have any record of your folks. Finally, go to every friend or relative you can think of and see if they know anything. If you still can't find them, come back and we'll test to see if any of the unidentified are your parents. What do you mean test? Mark asked. The deputy blew a long breath out before he answered. The people we haven't ID'd yet were burned quite badly. Unfortunately, they're unrecognizable. The only way we can be sure of who they are is through a DNA test comparing them to a known relative. The bad part is we don't know how long it'll take to get the results once the power comes back on, because there are going to be thousands of cases like this. Lisa was shaking, but had managed to stop crying. Well, I guess we'd better get busy, she said. Thanks for your help, Deputy. They walked back outside and headed for the jeeps. Jerry whispered to Mark that he and Tony would stick with them for a while, but would have to head home before too long. Mark told him that he understood. They loaded up and headed out for the hospital. Mark could see Lisa was on the verge of crying again. Don't worry, Lisa, we'll find them, Mark promised, praying that they would.